I really thought I was meant for healthcare my entire life. Like I was like, I'm going to get a hospital job. I'm going to work at this hospital for 20 plus years. Hopefully I'll save for retirement and retire early. And now I've just sped up my life and like my ability to retire so much earlier. And
welcome everybody to the Till Death Stop Me podcast, because the inevitable is one day we are going to die. Sounds pretty morbid, right? But you want to know what I think is even more depressing? Merely existing on this planet and not achieving, not going, not experiencing, not meeting, not having every single thing that I've ever wanted in this life. We have one shot to do this thing right. So we might as well experience every single thing we've ever wanted, have every single thing that we've ever wanted, build communities with long-lasting, meaningful relationships. Most importantly, achieve our ideal version of what success looks like to us. So that is why in this podcast, we're going to be interviewing people that, even against all the odds, have been able to do that and are working constantly every single day to build their ideal lifestyle. So without further ado, thank you for tuning in, guys. Let's get into this episode. I want to welcome Heather from Heather Studio to the TDSM podcast today. Heather is probably one of the fastest Etsy growing YouTubers on the internet right now. Heather has dedicated thousands, probably multiple of thousands of hours to her channel, giving back the most free content that I have seen to date. She is a multiple six-figure Etsy seller and has coached over 10,000 Etsy students. She comes from an extensive 5+ year medical background, and she decided to give all of that up to dive into this world of online entrepreneurship. So I'm really excited to dive into Heather's stories today, having little to no entrepreneurship exposure in her early years and pretty much getting to where she is today completely on her own. All right, and without further ado, I want to welcome Heather from Heather Studio to the TDSM podcast today.
hi, thanks for having me, Hannah.
Thanks for coming on, Heather. Heather is probably one of the fastest growing YouTubers that, like I mentioned in the intro, she has so much value to give. I mean, she's probably in a relatively short amount of time has given thousands of hours of free information on the internet. Like probably multiple thousands of hours have been dedicated to her channel. So I'm just really excited to have you, and hopefully we can unlock some of these golden nuggets for our audience today. But let's take a step back. Let's go to the beginning of your entrepreneurial journey. And I'm just really interested to hear more about what that was like for you, starting from your early days to kind of where you are today.
Yeah, so I started in, my story actually started in healthcare, which is surprising to a lot of people. Since I share so many marketing tips and things like that now on my channel, but I started in healthcare. I went to school to become an X-ray technologist, and I fell in love with a subspecialty of radiology, which was MRI, using magnets to image the body basically. And I went in headfirst into MRI. I ended up getting a full-time position right before the pandemic hit. And during that time, I purchased a home. Once the pandemic came about, they were cutting parts of the hospital as far as hours go and laying off workers to basically give more hours to nursing, which was completely understandable at that time. And once I purchased my home, I realized I had to find, once I purchased my home, it was the same time when they cut hours in the radiology departments. And so I lost my hours. And that's how my story started, was, getting a very stable job in healthcare that I thought would be stable even through a pandemic. That was surprisingly not as stable, which I was grateful to have a job. I know a lot of people lost their jobs during this time. A lot of people were laid off. I was lucky that my department kind of came together as a whole, and we all agreed to cut our hours in half in order for us all to kind of pay bills still. Well, during that time when they were cutting the hours in our department, So that year, I remember I was looking on LinkedIn, I was looking on all of these other job sites, and I was just looking for a second job to, give me some extra income during this time. And there were so many jobs for X-ray and MRI. I'm dual certified, so I have a degree in X-ray and MRI. So for me, I was like, okay, I can find a second job easily. There's so many jobs open still, even though they were cutting hours at my hospital. There was hundreds of jobs that I could apply for. And so I was looking, and then I came across YouTube videos about print on demand. And initially I was looking into like Amazon FBA, Merch by Amazon, KDP, and I came into the world of Etsy and print on demand. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. This is right up my alley. I've always wanted to design for t-shirts and sweatshirts, but I had no way of investing thousands of dollars up front. So I was like, okay, I'm in. Print on demand sounds amazing. So in 2020, when I was cut hours from my job in healthcare, I decided to go full force into the world of print on demand and Etsy. I opened a shop and I was selling neck gaiters because the whole thing of people purchasing masks on Etsy was so prevalent at that time. I knew it was high in demand. So I was like, let me go into masks and kind of get into this high demand product type. And later on, come to find out neck gaiters aren't widely accepted as like a mask in the States, of course. But at that time, I was like, okay, I'm going to go into something that's similar to masks, but not fully masks. So anyways, I sold neck gaiters. I sold a few of them. And production times with the company I was using was 3 to 4 weeks. And I just knew that reviews were so vital to my store growing on Etsy when I began that I was like, if production times are so delayed, I know I'm going to get low star reviews. So I'm going to close my store. This is just a sign. It's not time for me right now. And at the same time, I got my hours back in healthcare, and I actually got overage of hours. So with the pandemic in healthcare, it was a really strange time because a lot of us in departments that weren't nursing, we were cut hours. And I can't speak for everyone, of course, but at least for my department in radiology, we were cut hours. And then after the summer of the beginning of the pandemic, then we got way too many hours to the point where we were like, whoa, this is a lot, where, we had way more on-call hours, way more overtime, which was great. It was like, okay, I'm making overtime now. And it was awesome. But then at the same time, I had a taste of that entrepreneurship with the neck gaiters that I realized, oh man, I can't let this go. I have to get back into this at some point. So in 2021, I decided to reopen my Etsy and print on demand business. That year, I decided to go full force into it. I ended up uploading around 400 listings by the end of that year. And they were all based in apparel, t-shirts, sweatshirts. And it was the first few months, I'd say until March, I had like not many sales. And then it picked up to the point that I was getting a few hundred sales a month. And by the end of 2021, I had 250K in revenue. And in 2022, I didn't really upload that many new listings. And I had 180K in revenue the second year I was on Etsy, with me kind of more, not fully passive, but I was very much like, I'm going to put the shop on the back burner and see what it does without me uploading new listings. And now my shop sits at 450K in revenue. I quit my job in 2022. I did stay on part-time for longer than I should have. I feel like there is like a huge need for healthcare right now, that I didn't want to just like leave my hospital stranded. So I did stay on for a little bit. I trained a lot of people before I left. But it was a moment of, I kept asking for less and less hours at work. And my manager, I remember, was like, why are you working here still? Like, because they knew about my shop and they were just like, what are you doing here? Like, and I was like, I just want to, like, this is what I, went to school for 5 years for. And I love it. Like, I love helping people. I genuinely do. And But then I realized that I could do that on YouTube. So hence how I got on YouTube and TikTok, because I could impact people in a different way. That was kind of similar to healthcare, but not, more in the entrepreneur journey and financial freedom area. So
Did you have like any parents that were entrepreneurs, or or was your whole exposure to this like world of online entrepreneurship, was it just via YouTube?
it was all YouTube. Both my parents are, my mom, she's had basically labor jobs. My dad's had labor jobs. He's worked at a steel mill his whole life. So I think that that's where I've just gotten the kind of repetition and hard work and dedication to doing one task for a long period of time will get you some type of result. And I think I got that ingrained in me from my parents, but no one in my family has been an entrepreneur. So
And I think that's so interesting. Like, cause my mom was an entrepreneur. My dad was not, he's like the CEO's dream, basically, always just like in corporate jobs. Always wonder, like, there's this thing in my mind. I'm like, how much of life, nature versus nurture? It's like we turn out just like our parents, or we actually turn out like nothing like them. And in the case for you, is just more your nature to like be curious, I guess. I think those stories are so fascinating for somebody, trying to get in for the first time, or somebody that is kind of curious, but kind of like, reserved about taking action. What would you say to those people from your experience?
I think that that's what I've kind of thought of for a really long time is why was I successful over all these other, people? And I know there's a lot of really great stories and success stories out there. I always say don't compare my story to your story or anyone that's listening, because everyone is unique. And even if you didn't hit 250K in revenue in 1 year, that's still amazing. Even if you hit like 10K in revenue or made a side income or a side hustle of some sort. But I think it's just trying, like just, experimenting and knowing that, entrepreneurship is like a skill, and it's like a muscle you have to work.
Mm-hmm.
And because when I first started in 2020 and I closed my shop, I just remember I was like, oh, I didn't realize that I could actually do something bigger than what I thought. Like, honestly, the pandemic was a huge turning point in my life, because I really thought I was meant for healthcare my entire life. Like, I was like, I'm going to get a hospital job. I'm going to work at this hospital for 20 plus years. Hopefully I'll save for retirement and retire early. And now I've just sped up my life and like my ability to retire so much earlier. And it's so mind blowing to me what happened in that like shift because of the pandemic, that I got cut hours and I realized my job wasn't stable. And that's kind of what led me on this path. But it's just trying. Like, I was like, just by me trying that first time and I got some success, I think, that propelled me into seeing this success now where I quit my job, so.
And that's also why it's like so super interesting. The inevitable in life is like bad things are going to happen, right? Like, pandemics was like extreme, but even like now you're seeing like in the tech world, it's just changing, right? There's a shift happening in all these industries. And it's like, we are in this, at least I can't speak for other countries, but at least in America, like we're in this like unique position to decide, when things change, what side of the wave do we want to be on, right? Like, do we want to be chasing the wave, right, and let the wave pass? Or do we want to position ourselves, properly to catch the wave? And that's like literally what you did. You took a bad situation and decided, you know what, let me see if I can, position myself differently and actually make something good out of this. And now, you were obviously helping a lot of people in the medical world, but I'm sure now you're helping a lot more people. So I think that's really awesome. So yesterday, guys, me and Heather sat on the phone for like, I don't know, we were on the phone for like 2 hours. A 10-minute call turned into like 3 hours, and we really got to know each other. And she really emphasized something that is something that I truly stand by. And she takes, kind of a unique position on this, because it's like something that's indoctrinated into, her teachings, and that is sweat equity. So let me hear what your definition of sweat equity is. What does that mean to you, and how do you bring that to your students?
Yeah. So I guess when I first began with my entrepreneurship journey, I realized I did not have a high threshold for investment, or like a high amount of money I could invest into trying out entrepreneurship and even like my own business. Like I remember like going into apparel and whatnot. I really wanted to get into apparel and creating my own online business. But I was like, okay, well, if I started a Shopify store, I need to invest in ad spend. And then I also need to invest in the product and inventory. And that would be thousands of dollars. And I remember, just saving up for a car or a home. I was like, okay, do I invest in the home or the car or education to make more money or put it into retirement? I just didn't have that investment. And I came across a Gary Vee video, and he was talking about sweat equity. And it was so mind blowing to me, because I was just like, oh my gosh, this is what I can do, with print on demand, is sweat equity, which is kind of putting in the repetitions and using sweat equity by definition is basically using your time as your investment. Because you really, at least for me, when I began, I can only speak for myself, but I didn't have the investment of a few $1,000s. I only had about, $50 to $100 to start with print on demand and Etsy. And I just kept reinvesting the money, the profit I got, I reinvested into my business over time. And that's how I kind of scaled up. But initially it was like $50 to $100 and putting in a lot of time, elbow grease, and just listing every day that I could on Etsy, trying to better myself with education that is available on YouTube. So that's kind of what I did over time. But that's, I guess, the sweat equity method that I've taught and I try to teach, or my underlying goal for a lot of my YouTube videos and a lot of what I teach online is, if you don't have that upfront investment like I did, I didn't have that. Or at least I wasn't willing to spend what other entrepreneurs were willing to spend. So sweat equity can really come in clutch if you need it, instead of spending hundreds to thousands when you first start off. So
yeah, and that's so true. And there's so much learning like that just happens. Like, you can take all the courses in the world, which you should if you can't afford it. But even still, it's like there's so much learning that just happens when you go to market for the first time and learn who your customers are. And actually, to add to this, I actually have a really good example of what that situation is that she just described. So I just did a consult actually with somebody, not in the POD world, but they were making jewelry. And, I did a store audit for them. And basically, you could see like very clearly that one of their biggest limitations in their store was their marketing, so their photography. And for physical product goods, it can get very, very expensive to have a contractor photographer, professional photographer come in every single week and shoot your products, right? And so, a lot of people would look at that as, oh, I'm just going to give up because I can't afford a photographer. Actually, most people would probably look at that scenario and just, oh, well, I don't have the money or I don't want to risk it. Let me just walk away. But to your definition of sweat equity, right? Like the real entrepreneur, the tenacious entrepreneur is going to look at that basically obstacle and say, okay, what is the cheapest way that I can achieve a high level image for my products, right? So instead of just giving up, right, you can go pay a consult, instead of dishing out $1,000, ask a photographer, hey, can I throw you $150 to teach me what I need to know? Or you could spend the next 7 days figuring out how to do it yourself on YouTube, or it probably won't even take you 7 days, right? So it's like, if there's a will, there is a way. Like you can figure it out. Would you agree with that, Heather?
I think that's a great concept and example, because that is literally like how it is, just learning, it's kind of like DIYing stuff. If you can't hire someone or invest a few thousand, like you said, in photography, it's great to learn. So yeah. I definitely agree.
I mean, you dedicated over 5+ years essentially in this medical field, right? Like through school, in preparation. I'm sure you did internships or something like that, I would imagine.
Yeah, clinicals. Yep.
And so what was that emotional journey from being like, I just literally probably spent a lot of money and a lot of time doing this one thing. Let me actually do something else. If you wanted to go a little bit deeper on that with us today.
Yeah. So I would say like healthcare, like it was an incredible experience. I feel because it really shaped me to the entrepreneur I am today, where, like I feel like every job that you have throughout your life, or every like training or maybe educational program, like it really does shape you and give you those skill sets you don't realize you have until you're like faced with what you have to do each day. And healthcare was one of those situations, because during clinicals, like for clinicals, this is the part, because my fiance, he came from a financial background, and he said, internships, you get paid. And I was like, well, with clinicals for nurses and healthcare, you actually pay them most of the time. I've heard of paid clinicals where hospitals actually pay you, but for me, it was never that experience. You have to pay to be at a hospital, and it's usually thousands of dollars per year to just shadow employees at hospitals, and also work with patients and do x-rays under supervision. That was what I experienced during that time when I was in clinicals. But even that, it kind of taught me that that was the moment that I had when I became an entrepreneur. Is I invested so much money in paying a hospital to shadow their employees and work with their employees to become a healthcare professional, where I wouldn't be able to pay back my school loans until 5 years to 10 years down the line. I ended up paying it off much quicker just due to print on demand and Etsy. But that's just, I guess, the whirlwind I kind of went through, and what shaped me into, if you reinvest, even in, like, I still invest in my education now, as like I purchase courses, I purchase things for entrepreneurship and learning to be a better CEO. I purchase books, like I have books behind me that I'm always reading, because I'm always reinvesting. And I think that's what healthcare taught me, is to still reinvest, continue your education, don't stop learning, but also show up every day. Like even for like print on demand and Etsy, like I show up every day. I check in on my Etsy account. Given it's not that often because it's print on demand and a lot of the processes are streamlined, but still you do have to show up, and just doing 5 listings a day. That's kind of what I keep in mind is, okay, if I do my 5 listings a day, or a few listings a day, or even 1 listing a day, I'm showing up for my business. And it's very similar to like in clinicals and healthcare, where I showed up every day. So that's kind of, I guess, what I've taken from those experiences. And also just like going through the parts that aren't fun. Like, I feel like entrepreneurship is very much, I don't want to say this in the wrong context, but it's very much like a magical, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's like a magical unicorn, like people, I mean, and I feel like it's part of me on YouTube and TikTok showing the pros and all the beautiful parts of entrepreneurship. Like there are so many beautiful parts and magical parts, but there is also a lot of like blood, sweat, and tears that go into it too. Like we're not really, I mean, you don't necessarily like, at least I don't on my channel show all of the struggles. And that's why I've started this vlog series where I'm showing the struggle for once. Because I feel like it's really important to see that as well, but still the end result is amazing. Like, I mean, we make our own hours. Like I'm able to retire much earlier than I thought I would. I'm able to save, and do things I never thought possible in travel and all the things. So it's magical. Like I said, I feel like I just totally went back on what I just said.
No, I'm with you. It's like, have you ever seen that graph of like the mountain? It's like, I'll put one on the screen here. It's like you're going up one day and you're like, oh my God, my life's amazing. And then you're like, oh shit, everything sucks and everything's broken. And then you go up again. But like, it's like this up and down, but the overarching trajectory is like, you're still becoming a better CEO. You're still, getting more identity capital, and the sweat equity is paying off because you're going up. But it's like definitely not all rainbows and butterflies. So tell us a little bit more about this case study that you're doing on your channel right now that you kind of mentioned.
Yeah. So I started this 21-day challenge in May where I started it for students initially because I was like, okay, how do I get people to just start, and put in that sweat equity and keep them accountable? So I started my 21-day challenge, which is for 21 days, I challenge any student in that challenge to post 5 listings a day and keep accountable to that. And I made like cute little calendars and little worksheets to kind of help throughout that process. But then I realized as I created this whole challenge, I was like, man, how cool would it be to watch like a YouTuber do their own challenge and just like go through it, do the sweat equity and start like a completely new Etsy business. And so that's what I did. I ended up opening up a new shop and doing this challenge with my students. And they didn't know until the last day of the challenge. I posted because I had a little private community group, and I posted in the group and I said, hey, by the way, I've been doing this challenge alongside you. And it was really cool. It was one of those moments everyone was like, what? Like, but I started with 0 sales, 0 reviews, 0 social media on this new shop. It's currently at over 100 sales 3 months in. It's not hitting those like amazing, incredible milestones, but I know from like my last time I started an Etsy business, it was tracking along the same route where it's a very slow growth. It's just posting consistently every week, every month, and just keeping working on that business. So that's what I'm trying to show is through the series, documenting the process, and that, even me as an entrepreneur that does Etsy and print on demand full time all day, every day, it still is like a lot, to add to your plate. So that's kind of what I've been doing now with the new Etsy business and just showing that journey.
And this is just free on your channel, watching this happen live, basically.
Yep. Yeah, it's a vlog series. So it's a little bit different than content I've done in the past, where I'm just kind of vlogging my daily life and doing like week in the life, day in the life, and just showing like kind of the behind the scenes of YouTube too, and my other things I do. So I do like consulting, coaching. I do like monthly mentorship calls that I like kind of show the process of me prepping for those. And then also on top of that, just doing my listings every day. So.
Oh, that's awesome. All right. Well, I'm going to make sure that I link Heather's channel below so you can follow that. I'm curious. I want to follow that series. I think we have a free course that we're going to also be sharing, correct? You have a free course that you have?
Yeah. So it's called the Print on Demand Crash Course for those who want to start with their print on demand and Etsy businesses. It's kind of A to Z beginner's guide on how to set up your store, integrate it to Printify, or if you're using other companies. And it kind of just walks you through the process of what you should know when you start your own business, even like how to pay yourself as a new business owner and how to kind of set up that system. So kind of just the beginner's guide.
Perfect. All right. Yeah. We will link that below as well. And before we go, we have to ask the fundamental question here today. What is the number one thing you're never going to stop doing until death stops you?
Whoa. I think I feel like you briefed me with this question yesterday, and I did not take time to think about this. But
it's a serious question, Heather.
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is just motivate. motivating others. I think I will not stop motivating others until the day I die, because that is, I guess, my like life goal is to motivate others, that they know that they can do so many more things than maybe what they've been taught that they're capable of, or that they think that they're capable of, that there's so much more that you can do in your life. So
yeah, I love that. And you're walking proof of that. So that's awesome. All right, Heather, thank you so much. And guys, all the links to everything we talked about today are going to be below this video. So yeah, thank you, Heather. I'll talk to you soon.
yeah, thanks for having me again, Hannah.
Bye, girl.